Hello again. This morning we're in conversation with former student leader and activist Fasihah Hassan. Hassan has been awarded the Norwegian Student Peace Prize for her role in the hashtag You'll Remember Fees Must Fall movement. She was recognized for her non-violent efforts to help students gain equal access to higher education. The law student was part of Wits University student leadership between 2015 and 2017. It's a great pleasure to have you in studio with us this morning. Congratulations on your prize. What does that essentially mean?
Wow. So, I think it's, as much as it's been awarded to myself, I think it's more about every young person and every person who put their degrees, their futures and their bodies on the line. So for me, it's not even about myself, it's more about the movement and Fees Must Fall as a whole. So it doesn't belong to Fasihah. I think it belongs to every single young person who is involved in the fight for free education.
The bigger movement.
Exactly, exactly.
Let's talk about that moment. I mean, when Fees Must Fall started in the country, a lot of people actually likened that to events that unfolded in 1976. It was marked as a huge, momentous moment, which was met with resistance also from the police. Would you say that the movement has achieved that which it set out to achieve?
If we compare 2015 sort of higher education in comparison to now, I think there's been huge gains. But I think it would be incorrect to say that the movement's done and that we've achieved everything that we wanted to. So as much as there's been this huge announcement on free education that was last year, by a former president, I think that we're not done until we ensure it gets implemented, right? Even if there's an announcement, even if we don't do enough to make sure that nothing's happening on the ground, it won't have been for anything, really. So I think there needs to be a huge emphasis right now, as there is on the bureaucratic element, about ensuring that government actually, does what it says it's going to do. But also there's a very big thing about amnesty. I mean, the Fees Must Fall movement's not done. There's a huge move for us to ensure that students who have charges can actually be addressed. And, there's students who are in the court processes, students who are in university disciplinaries. So there's a lot of work that's still ongoing, even if we don't see Fees Must Fall on our TV screens, and even if we don't see people on the streets.
Let's expand on that. How far have we actually come with that? We saw Mcebo Dlamini, when you speak on the issue of pardon, walking all the way to the union buildings to hand over that memorandum to the president asking for pardon. How far are we with that process?
In fact, Mcebo is going to court later this week. Bonginkosi as well has a sentencing day this week, so there's a lot of movement in that. But right now, I don't know if you recall, we're working with the Ministry of Justice, who is essentially taken on this process of understanding who has what charges against them. Quite a few students have really apartheid legislation charges against them, like illegal gatherings. If you're more than 16 people, you have to apply for permission, etc. So, if you're a friendship group of 17 people, you're now in trouble here. So that's the one thing. There's also the issue of public violence. So it's an ongoing process, but it's taking time because we're having to find the students ourselves, we're having to speak to them, there's an issue of confidentiality. So it's ongoing, but unfortunately it is not moving as fast as we would hope to.
What do we put that down to?
I think that there are issues of bureaucracy and actual, processes, government processes that take a long time. But also there's the court process. As a law student, I can tell you the court process takes very long. Postponement after postponement, it can be very long, very drawn out. In fact, some cases take years.
Can we put it down to a lack of maybe showing goodwill on the part of authorities and government?
We could. There's definitely that element. But I don't think that's the only issue. I think that we also need to be pushing harder. I think if we continuously just allow the system to continuously delay, we're also doing a disservice to our students. So, Fees Must Fall was a very similar one, right? We saw a lack of goodwill on the issue of free education, but we continued to push, and then in the end we were ultimately still successful. So I think it's not just about that. It's about pushing, but it's also about being creative. It's about saying, okay, we understand the court process takes long, but what can we do to try and speed up those elements?
How do you respond to some of the criticism that you have faced in terms of being part of the ANC communications team and people saying, well, maybe you're not fighting the cause enough now that you're on the other side? Is that even a fair assessment to make?
I don't think it's a fair assessment. It's important to note, before Fees Must Fall we were ANC members, during Fees Must Fall we were ANC members, and even now. So there's no inconsistency. I think what's different is that when we were doing Fees Must Fall, we took tactical decisions decision to make it non-partisan, which is not at odds with what we were doing. So there's no inconsistency between what we were doing before and what we're doing now. I think many people perhaps don't know those things, but what we also need to understand is that when we get opportunities as young people to change policy and to affect things for the benefit of other young people, particularly on the issues of youth unemployment and the economy, we also can't wash our hands of responsibility. Part of what we were fighting for in Fees Must Fall is also about young people being taken seriously and being given important roles, not just in government, but important spaces. So now when those opportunities come, we can't run away and say, okay, we're not going to take the responsibility of doing the hard work. So it's a combination of the two things.
Let's go back, perhaps, and talk about that tipping point that actually birthed the resistance.
I don't know if we can put it down to one particular point. I mean, many people think that the fight for free education started on the 14th of October in 2015. But in actual fact, the fight for free education started many, many years before that. At institutions of higher learning like TUT, Univen, you know, the historically disadvantaged institutions where almost every year there were protests, right, around unaffordable fees and free education. It so happened that when Wits University and other, you know, historically advantaged institutions started to protest, it became a thing. So I don't want to put it down to a date in 2015 that was that epicenter moment. Sure, it gained a lot of traction, but I think that this fight has been ongoing for many, many years. And now that we're coming to fruition, I think we must acknowledge the work of so many activists who 10, 15 years ago were fighting for this as well.
I'd like to speak about the activists who are currently, some incarcerated, some who are facing charges, and all of that in terms of engagement that you guys have with them. What does this essentially mean? I think looking from the outside in, you would just think, maybe their studies are disrupted just for a bit and then they get back into the system and finish. Is it as easy as that? What has the strain been that has been put on them?
There's been huge strain. Of course, there's the thing of you not being able to study, but remember, if you have charges, you're unlikely to get a job. So even if you are able to finish your degree, it's almost all for nothing, because who's going to employ someone with a criminal record, right? So that's the one thing. But in addition to that, we're also seeing huge issues of students' mental health. And not even just students, we're seeing it throughout the university community, of people who are really suffering from PTSD, given what happened with the police brutality, but also the kind of strain that a so-called revolution takes on a person. We've seen so many young people take their own lives, so many young people who are in depression and anxiety, and I think we're only starting to see the huge effects of that now. You know, it takes some time for people to make sense of what's happened, and I think that's starting to happen now, but we're seeing huge implications, and I don't think we can just push it under the carpet and say, oh, it's because they protested, they deserved it. The only reason we ever had to protest was because of the inequality of the system. If the system was fair, and if the system had opportunities that are equal for everybody, we wouldn't have had to do what we did. So it's also not a fair assessment to say, oh, it's because they didn't want to write exams, or, oh, it's because they were protesting, they deserve it. No one deserves to have gone through what students are going through now. No one deserves to be incarcerated in jail, or to find themselves in a position where their futures are in complete jeopardy.
Through what you're studying, is there a shadow of doubt in your mind that you're doing that which you were called to do?
I know I'm doing exactly what I'm meant to do. I'm a law student. I've just finished my LLB now, so we're moving on to my master's. I do believe that the law, I'm hoping, in terms of rights-based litigation and administrative law, is something that I can use to further my activism. So I'm looking at how I can fuse what we've already done with hopefully my future career in the law as well.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Congratulations on all fronts, and that award is much deserved.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you. And that was a student activist, Fasihah Hassan. Now, it's a rainy Saturday in some parts of the country. Let's check in with the Weather Center and see what it's looking like in your side of town. Here's Anika Dibia. Thank you so much.